the next thing in your agenda was something that I have been calling Stump the Evaluator, which is just throw out projects and things you've heard about or make stuff up, and I will try and spitball evaluation methods, which will hopefully do some repetition of like the exercise we just did, but much faster, and B, expose you hopefully to some more methods ideas.
Choral group is going to perform at the local church, and they're going to do America is Wonderful.
Okay.
Period.
Period.
Full stop.
You know, they're describing this event. It's a one night event, and they're asking for a grant. And how do they evaluate this particular program?
So I'm gonna make up some motives for them that they might not have. This part is the part that would need to be teased out of people using those questions like we did this morning. I'm going to make up that what they care about is people having an awareness of an affinity for choral music, right? Maybe lots of people in their area don't think that choral music is for them. It's for church ladies or people not from my cultural group or whatever, right? That's the current public perception. And they want to change that perception among their community members. And so their outcome might be that people who attend the event have a more positive perception of choral music, that they see that there's a greater breadth to it, or they see that it's relevant to them in some way. And so you might get at that with, what I'm grumpy about is not that it's impossible, but it's that in my mind, the thing I jump to with a question, an outcome like this, is a survey, which I'm trying not to do, right? So I would say something like a one or two or maybe 3 question survey of like, did something surprise you about this show? Or what did you think about this kind of music before you got here today? What do you think about it now? Or maybe they hand out tickets to people to get in the door, and they say, keep your tickets. And then when you're leaving, you have 2 buckets at the exits, and they have big bright signs and say, if you might come to something like this again, or if this seems like a style of music that's for you, put it in the green bucket. And if you don't really think so, put it in the red bucket. And if you're just not sure, you need to know a little bit, put it in the yellow bucket, right? And you get a sense of not necessarily change, but if the audience had a positive perception of that art form as a result or through the course of that experience. Not perfect, but a little bit better than counting the number of tickets sold.
So was that one hard just because we're trying to get a feeling from them, or is it hard because we're not letting them do something that's easy? Like our groups like that will do, how far have you come to see this performance? Like they're evaluating breadth of communication and press release. Did you bring somebody new with you this time? Something that talks about diversity. Or would you bring someone new next time? You know what I mean? Like that concept of, you are the choir, you're preaching to the choir, but did your experience cause you to want to enlarge the audience or deepen the experience or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot of groups in our area that do the same thing to the same people. So if they can think outside the box to, what are we trying to do?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this choral performance again? Might help them understand what that is. Because we want to do a Mozart choir this time. Everything by Mozart. So so what did people find out? Do they know more about Mozart leaving here?
Yeah. What you said about how far did you travel today made me think of another one that might get at that positive perception, which would be, how far would you be willing to travel to go to something like this again? Yeah. And if the answer is 100 feet, maybe it was a dud. And if it was, I live in Winona, but I would go to Fargo for this. Like that's a home run, right? Yeah. Anybody else got a burning example?
Some piece of equipment is always tricky to get them to think further out of what that is and evaluate that.
Yeah.
Or the roof.
Or the roof,
A new lighting system.
lighting system.
Yeah, and I think when that came up earlier today, I think the track that you started down yourselves was exactly the right track for that kind of stuff, which is not just did you get the thing, yes or no, but what difference did it make for your audience, for your community, for your organization? Unless you're really bad at writing grants, you don't get the thing just because you want it. You get it because it has some purpose that you want to serve, right? And it, like, getting a computer, right? And maybe the volunteer organization gets its first computer in order to create administrative efficiencies and free up more volunteers to do programming, right?
Communicate.
Or yeah,
Communicate usually with constituents, new and current, is usually what they want to do with it. So
Yeah.
how did the new computer help you communicate? And they could.
yeah,
I can remember a grantee that wanted upgrades to their lighting and sound systems, and Betsy, help me if I'm misquoting here. But their measurement was without those upgrades, they were not able to bring in the higher quality acts that need better equipment to perform well. And because of poor lighting or sound system, they were hearing that some audience members didn't want to come back again.
oh,
So it was keeping and increasing the quality of their audience and the acts they were able to book in.
yeah. So that would be a good case where something like the methodological term is a retrospective pretest, where that organization could have gone to acts that they'd booked in the past and been like, think back to the last time you did a gig here. What was the infrastructure like? How was the lighting? How was the sound? And like have them be honest, and then have them answer the same questions about the new system and like what it did. Not just in terms of how technically sound it was or wasn't, but like, you know, did it make them feel more taken seriously or respected as artists by the community? Did it make it easier for them to have more engagement with the audience? Right? That kind of
They
thing.
recommend to other groups that this was a good venue to play at, who might be
Yeah.
able to get at that.
Yeah, totally. And asking why would get at their perceptions about the facility. Yeah.
So we have a technology and equipment grant for artists, and one of the things that it funds is helping you develop your online presence, pay for the development of a website or something like that. What are some suggested sort of methods to measure whether or not having that website helped you further your artistic career?
Yeah.
It's sort of, well, once I build the website, sometimes they know that that's what they need, but they're not quite sure what it's going to give them or
Yeah.
how they'll be able to use it.
In your shoes, I think my first question there would be help encouraging them to identify like what they want to get out of it, right? And it might be any one of those things. They could use their calendar of bookings to do a comparison there and see if it really did kind of trend upward, right?
But what you wouldn't want, like, I sort of think it'd be like page clicks is sort of the same as attendance. So you would want something that's more profound than that. It's that sort of just like the counting of beans.
I don't know. Like it gets fuzzy with this kind of thing because there are times when the outcomes are quantitative in that way. They kind of look outputty.
Possible to say like survey a bunch of artists who are about, say, like their level of artistry that they, you know, maybe not ones that they're really personally familiar with, like their brother-in-law, but you know, have them go out and look at their website
Yeah.
and report back their perception of them
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that would be good if the goal is to create a high quality website, but if the goal is to increase their opportunities in the future, then that doesn't measure whether it's actually accomplishing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the scope of the project limits how long a term afterwards they can measure these sorts of things.
That's true.
So that's where it becomes sort of tricky for them
Yeah.
to not just gauge like page clicks.
What?
You know, one that would be really good for them, but would be hard to get people to do, because I know I, as a visual artist, would be scared of it, but I would love it if I could push myself to do it, would be contact 5 galleries to look at your website.
And get a critique.
That's very good.
Yeah, I like that. The other thing that what you said about the contacting other artists a minute ago is, rather than just using like the raw number of clicks or likes or whatever, benchmarking your performance of the website against that of your peers might feel more outcomey. That's a technical word, right?
That's a part of me that sometimes, like, if they have this project, when I see that their goals are to get like so many more opportunities or something like that, I almost want to draw them back and be like, maybe a more realistic goal in the scope of this grant is to create a high quality website for yourself and get that like peer feedback about whether the website's actually, because I feel like within the scope of the grant, that's what you can actually measure and get feedback on in that length of time.
And the thing that's within their direct control, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that the number of clicks or likes or whatever, they might be the indicator. They might be a measurable thing, but they're not the intended outcome. Yeah.
Renae, could it work for individual artists with a website that there were industry standards for a successful website that had 5 points to it? Right now, your site only has 1.5. Could you then work on like SEO, PayPal, the other things that would be recognized as being a success? Would that work as evaluation?
Huh. It hadn't occurred to me. Perhaps. Like that, so to me that feels kind of like an observational rubric, right? Like,
Do you mean that they're selling work from their website?
I'm not exactly sure what I mean. If there are industry standards for a successful website, that there are elements that your website needs to have, whether it's
Like
buttons.
opens easily.
Yeah, and if
Within
there
a
is
certain amount of
social
time.
media sharing,
Yeah.
if there is comment section, if there is ability to purchase.
I think that all really depends on what what your purpose is in having a website. I think it would be different for different kinds of websites.
But I think that's useful because they should be able to articulate what that purpose is and then articulate, what components they're going to need to have in it.
So you say successful website, what exactly does that mean? And I would think there would be some commonality for artists' websites. I don't know.
or some criteria that they would
And
articulate.
that's one of the technological things that we occasionally discuss in our office is where people are on the technological spectrum. And we might have people who have dropped doing websites and are more into Twitter accounts and Snapchat, and they're even farther along in the technological curve in terms of who their market audience is.
Right,
and
or
what they're
somebody who just has their Etsy store.
Yeah, it's that type of a deal. So in terms of a range of the perspective of, because as we all know, the social media world continues to evolve and change, and just when we think, okay, we're good, we've got this now, and it's like, no, that's outdated. Now you have to do this instead. So you're continually working your way towards whatever's coming down the pipe.
Well, and the different tools work well for different things. I mean, really, hopefully we'll see our artists doing all sorts of things, because depending on what kind of art they have, who they're trying to sell to, what they're trying to sell, what demographic they're trying to sell to. I mean, it all changes what the best platform would be for them to use.
Correct.
They could identify though what their goal is, and then within that, what Maxine is saying there could be a guide to, did you achieve that actually is close to what other people are doing.
And I
There might be a middle ground here that relates to them as an individualist, and yet something that we know about our sector, you know, that actually helps them say, I met it midway. I really wanted PayPal, I did not figure that one out. You know, because sometimes the negative feedback is good feedback too. You know, we try and not say that you should always have 100% success, that you should be realistic about what actually happened and learn from that. So,
Now, a lot of times, you know, the goal, you know, is a sort of publicity or increasing opportunities goal. So I thought yours was really, really good, and I'm going to suggest that to people when they have that goal now, because I hadn't thought of that, and that is a great way for them to get critical feedback from the audience they're seeking to reach instead of their peer audience.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, we've been talking all day about making sure that these evaluation methods really first benefit them and secondarily benefit us.
Yeah.
So then how do we tie all these back into those higher level goals that is the real aim of this?
That's a great question. Yes. Well, so for me, it comes back to the pyramid we started with, right? That these things we ask people to measure, we're asking them to measure them in order to see if they're meeting their own intended outcomes. And those intended outcomes, we have scaffolded for them. We have compelled them to align what they want to do with what our grant programs want to do. Right? You with me? And then our grant programs, all you know, heaven's willing, are in turn aligned in a deliberate way to those big five. So it's kind of like building a block tower, almost.
Can
Right?
I repeat that back to you, how I understand it, and see if I got it?
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that all of my grant programs are structured on those big five.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to put in like some sort of choice, whether it's a drop-down menu or click boxes or whatever it is, something that they have to choose that says that they're supporting X. And then when they come to their outcomes, they're going to have to show us how their outcome is supporting X, which is also supporting the big five. And then we have the evaluation of the outcome.
By cracky, you got it!
You could have saved us 4 hours. That's beautiful. That's awesome. All right, so it's not going to be the easiest thing, but that is exactly why we're here today and what the statewide project committee is proposing.
So then we really have to come up with those more general ideas that are going to be these drop-down, click boxes, whatever they're going to be.
Yeah. Keep in mind, as a basis, the State Arts Board, what Greta was saying, has already done that
We've
work.
already done that.
You can take those, use them, add to them, whatever you want to do in your region. But a good primary starting place is already done.
The goldenrod sheet are the clicky boxes that the Arts Board is going to use. That it's the result of what we did with the green sheet, like you did this morning. And that's I think you're right that is the first step in building the pyramid. We're kind of building the pyramid from the top down a little bit, but yeah.
Is there a reason that only 3 of the big 5 are on this sheet? Is that
Yes, in fact there is. Our board and staff decided that our grant programs really only support 3 of the 5. There's one about people trusting the stewardship of the public funds, which is really more administrative. And there's one about people believing that the arts are important, and for us that boiled down to really being more about our communications and public and government relations stuff. So these are the 3 that are best supported by our grant programs. It might be, I'll say this louder because it's really important, thank you for asking, that you'll see on the goldenrod sheet that only 3 of the big 5 are supported by the Arts Board's grant programs. It may be that the other 2 of the big 5, which I threw down in the table, that's the thing on the really big print if you want to take a copy. The ones about people believing in the value of the arts and believing in the stewardship of the public dollars, It might be that your grant programs support those really well and explicitly. They might not. But our staff and board decided that our grant programs are not the parts of our operations that really support those goals. So we left them off here. If it helps, it might not help because, as I said before, state agency land is like wading through molasses while wearing cement shoes. To create this goldenrod sheet, I started this about my second week on the job, so about 2 years ago. This was about an 18-month process for us. You all, because you are not public agencies and because you are smaller and more nimble, it might go a lot faster. Creating that kind of content is an awesome thing for like a board retreat. Like lock everybody in a room for a whole day and just churn it out and have a really good lunch so people don't burn out. From where I sit, it took forever. From where you sit, it might not take forever. The last thing, so we've spent all day, there's that light again, we spent all day talking about what's an outcome for us, what's an outcome for our applicants and grantees, how on earth do we help these people who might maybe know nothing about evaluation, how do we talk to them in a consistent way, how do we give them structure, how do we talk them through this complicated stuff. And really the part that is collecting information at the scale of our organizations, and that is final reporting. Right? Say hello to the panda again, and then we'll move on, right? So I really quickly have some proposals again from the statewide committee for ways that we could have, what's the right way to say this, to have questions or fields within final reports that are common across our entire system, so that we can talk about how all of our grantees have theoretically made a difference in particular ways, and we can kind of aggregate all of that data back up the pyramid so that we can talk about the Big Five and the difference we as a system are making in the Big Five, which sounds really abstract. And this is another thing that took me 1.5 years to figure out. I won't try and explain too much detail, but.
Can I interject really quickly, Renae?
Yes.
The legislature has determined specific things that they want reported in the final report that we have no leeway with. Much of the final report, what you're going to be seeing, is what we are required and we are already collecting. But again, this is going to be helpful to know how we tease that out from the application and what actually gets reported back to us in an easier, more concise way to fulfill the reporting requirements.
Yes, that's the hope. Thank you. And this slide lists, these are the two prime offenders in that category of things we have no choice in the matter about, right? That asking people in their final reports what their actual outcome was as a bonus. I think the Arts Board still does it. We ask people to repeat their intended outcome that they put in the application and to write down their actual outcome in case those two things are different, because sometimes they are. Sometimes the scope or focus or just the results aren't quite what someone anticipated, and that's okay. But what the legislature wants is the actual thing that the money did. And then a little bit of narrative that describes what people learned when in theory they reflected about or gathered evidence about or made observations about, all those words again, what they did, what difference they made. So those are the ones that are pretty much already in there. I'm going to prattle on a little bit about system-wide alignment and why this stuff matters, right? I'm reading again, because again, super complicated. We have these Big Five goals as a system, and in theory, although in practice it hasn't really worked this way yet, but in theory we're all sort of held accountable together for accomplishing or making progress toward those Big Five goals And the fun thing is we all have a deadline, right? we have that 2034 looming, terrifying 25-year sunset. And it can only help to make the sunset go away if we have shown some progress. What's the thing from the Founding Father? We must all hang together, or we most assuredly shall hang separately, right? So the more closely we can be mutually conforming in how we gather our reporting data, and I say conforming rather than identical, because we all will have different programs and different goals and different needs depending on our region or any number of things, right? But the better we can do that, the better positioned we are to talk about our collective impact as a whole system, right? That if instead of comparing apples to oranges or oranges to Volkswagens to bowling balls, we can compare Honey Crisps to Zestars to Red Delicious, we can make a stronger case together, basically. So that's what this recommendation of having common fields is really all about. The philanthropy buzzword there is collective impact, which it really is the difference greater than any one grant maker or organization on some bigger system like an entire state. So that's the why. And here's a little bit more of the how. And is this where I have another handout? I think it might be. I think this might be your last handout. No, this is not your last handout yet, I'm sorry. The next slide is your last handout. So these are some more proposed questions. This is the one I talked about a second ago, right? What was your original outcome you put in your application? And the one above it is what that magic drop down, your grant program outcomes. Which grant program outcome did you select in your application? What are you aligning to that's part of this bigger top of the pyramid structure? And then finally, how successful would you say this project was at meeting your outcome? And the beautiful thing about this question and making it a rating scale that pairs with the narrative is it's really easy to compare numbers on a rating scale across very different projects, very different kinds of interventions, and to take an average or a total across all of the projects that one regional arts council funds or across all of the projects that the whole system funds, as long as they are sort of able to be categorized against things like your program outcome, right? You can aggregate things that are sufficiently similar in that way, and we can quantify in a new and exciting way. So these three questions are things that we would like to have everyone include in your final report if it is feasible and if you are amenable to it. Fairly said? No.
Will the rating scale have suggested words to it in a sense? Because like we all know that you have your really positive people that just, oh, it's just a 10, and then you have people that are the exact same thing and they're rating it lower. So I think whenever I've put words in there, I've been more successful at actually getting at what really happened.
Yeah.
Because that rubric type of concept gets them to think it isn't just about me and my positivity coming out. It's that I really, oh yeah, they actually didn't do that, or So it does help a bit. So it might be something to think about in the long run.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point. We hadn't thought that far down the line yet, Mara, but because even if they're slightly different, it skews the data. If we could all agree to a Likert scale that goes from none to highly exceeded or whatever those words are.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, then you don't have the opposite, the blackballing too. Like, oh, I can't give this a really horrible score because they really did okay on quite a few of these items. Or this project did okay or whatever it is. I have found that makes a pretty big difference nowadays. And then the other thought with this. Some of the grant software we're using is auto-populating a lot of that stuff now. So like I do that, and I can show people how to do that. So like the original project outcome statement does pop into my final report, and as well as other things. So So, you know, it's,
So yes.
it's nice. Yeah.
The other thing as an addendum that I think we talked about in discussions and I didn't put on this part of the slide is with these last two questions here, there's also an opportunity because sometimes the outcome is great, but it's not what you were expecting. And so like adding a checkbox of, oh, well, you know, there was some other unexpected outcome of this, right? And that could be everything from, you know, we weren't expecting much skill development in participants in a program, but, you know, they really did become better painters in addition to becoming better whatever we set out to do. Or it might be some, in theory, also some unintended negative outcome, although I'm struggling to come up with one.
How much specific information do you want about the particular project?
For this one, the first bullet here, I'm looking for the middle of the pyramid, the grant program outcome that the person has aligned to.
The checky boxes.
The checky boxes. Yeah. And then for this is the one for an individual project that they identify, that they write. So if you were to have applicants go through the green sheet exercise, what they would get at the end for their own project. And if you really want to go crazy, which you don't, but I feel like I have to say it anyway, I have a whole wish list because I'm a giant nerd. So your last handout in your packet is Renae totally going crazy with a wish list of things to ask people in final reports. This is not what we are asking you to do today. I know. This is not what we're asking you to do today. But what this is like the custom Cadillac Rolls-Royce version of alignment for evaluation. Like what all of these questions do are help us look at without having to have people write a long technical report and take a lot of the time away from their project. Pinning down exactly how they did their evaluation so that to the greatest extent possible we can aggregate their findings to talk about, you know, how much difference did you make and how did you observe that difference, because the ways that people observe things, the methods they use, can't necessarily be added up together at the findings level. So probably this will literally either put you to sleep or make gray matter ooze out your ear because it's 3 o'clock. So I won't expect you to discuss it or look at it or think about it now, particularly because it's written in Renae's very highly jargony technical language. And I'm already thinking about how to rewrite and reword most of it. But to give you an idea of if we were a really 1000% streamlined, unified system and wanted to dig really, really deeply into thinking about our impact, and we might want to do that someday. It is my sincere and naive hope that we all might want to do that someday. That this is the kind of stuff that it would take. That the things we're asking of you or recommending to you today, these 3 guys, are going to get us a good chunk of the way there, and they're going to give us something to start out talking about and thinking about as a system. And it might be that over time we add in a couple of these questions at a time. I don't know, depending on how much of a hassle ongoing chronic systems change is for final reporting forms. I don't know. But there's more to be asked if we want to. And
I think, Renae, if we digest this and get it solidified
Yeah.
for us, to have you come back in 6 months, a year, year and a half, and talk with us again, okay, you've got the basics here, if you want a Cadillac,
Yeah.
this is what we can look at.
I would be thrilled to do that. And I think by that point, so a version of these questions are, once I rewrite them, going to go into the Arts Board's fiscal year 2017 final reports. So I might have some findings to show you, to give you a sense of what's possible using these questions, so that you can make a better determination of if it's worthwhile for you all to use. So that's all the content I have. I will stay for as much feedback or chatting or more evaluator stumping or whatever you need. And I'll let Greta and Maxine close out.
Can we give Renae a big applause?